Imagine waking up before dawn, not to chase a dream, but to crawl through filth, rot, and death just to earn another day of life. In the Middle Ages, there were no career choices. There were only the jobs nobody wanted, the ones that reeked of decay, danger, and desperation. Forget the fantasy of knights and nobles. For most people, survival meant embracing disgust. Every town needed workers willing to handle what others couldn't bear to see or smell. Waste, corpses, disease, and vermin, these were the raw materials of medieval labor. People didn't become heroes. They became rat catchers, dung shovelers, corpse handlers. Their reward wasn't respect, it was survival. And yet these same outcasts kept the medieval world from collapsing. They were the invisible backbone of civilization, shunned in public, essential in secret. There's a universal fear that runs through every century, the terror of humiliation, of being seen as less than human, of doing degrading work just to stay alive. In the Middle Ages, that wasn't a fear, it was daily reality. So tonight, forget the glory of armor and banners, step into the real medieval world, a place where survival meant filth, where dignity was a luxury, and where the most disgusting jobs kept humanity from drowning in its own waste. Let's begin with the first and perhaps most ironic of these professions, the rat catchers, men who fought the plague, one bite at a time.
You can almost hear it, the scratching in the walls, the squeaking underfoot, the sound of tiny claws racing through the dark. In a medieval city, rats weren't pests. They were everywhere. They slept in grain sacks, gnawed through shoes, and scurried over sleeping children. And with them came the Black Death, a plague that wiped out half of Europe. Enter the rat catcher. His job? Hunt the creatures carrying death itself. No gloves, no mask, no medicine, just instinct, nerve, and the faint hope that today wouldn't be his last. He carried a sack, a club, maybe a few dogs trained to kill. Some used smoke to drive the rats from their hiding places. Others reached into holes with their bare hands. Every catch was a gamble. One bite, one scratch, one flea, and his veins might already be filling with plague. There was no glory in the job. Towns needed rat catchers, but they didn't welcome them. People kept their distance, crossing the street to avoid the smell, the superstition, the reminder of what the catcher touched every day. He was necessary and untouchable. The irony is bitter. These men fought an invisible war against disease without ever understanding it. They faced the world's deadliest pandemic armed with nothing but courage and ignorance. Think of it this way. During a modern outbreak, we wear masks, gloves, and layers of protection. The medieval rat catcher had none of that, just a stick, a torch, and a prayer. But while the rat catcher faced death in the streets, another worker waded straight into it, waist-deep, in darkness, surrounded by human waste, the Gong farmer, the king of medieval filth. When night fell in a medieval town, another kind of worker emerged from the shadows, the Gong farmer. The word gong meant what polite society refused to say out loud: human waste. These men were responsible for cleaning out cesspits and latrines by hand. By sunrise, the streets would look a little cleaner, but beneath the surface, they faced one of the most revolting and dangerous jobs imaginable. Picture the scene. It's midnight. The town is silent, except for the slosh of shovels and the wet sound of buckets scraping through sewage. Gong farmers worked waist-deep in filth, pulling out layer after layer of human waste with nothing but wooden tools and sheer endurance. The air was thick with methane, invisible, explosive, and suffocating. One careless spark from a lantern and the pit could erupt like hell itself. Many never climbed back out. They were forbidden from working during the day. No one wanted to see them, smell them, or even acknowledge their existence. Yet without them, the cities would have drowned in their own excrement. They were the sanitation system before sanitation existed, the unsung saviors of public health who lived and died in isolation. The paradox was cruel. Gong farmers earned good money compared to most peasants, but wealth couldn't buy acceptance. They were banned from markets, from taverns, even from churches. People whispered that their stench carried sin, so they lived apart, necessary but never welcome. Imagine that, a man who risked suffocation, infection, and death every night so that others could wake to clean streets, yet couldn't sit beside them at a meal. If the rat catcher fought the plague in the open, the Gong farmer fought it underground. But not all medieval workers faced filth from waste. Some endured it from blood, hides, and rotting flesh. The next descent into horror belongs to the tanners and butchers, the workers who lived in a world that stank of death.
If you followed the smell of a medieval town, it would lead you straight to the outskirts, to the tanners and butchers. These weren't craftsmen of luxury or culinary art. They were the handlers of rot, the people who worked elbow-deep in blood and decay so others could eat, dress, or survive. Towners were trapped in a nightmare of their own making. Their craft began with animal carcasses hauled in from slaughterhouses, hides thick with fat, flesh, and hair. To strip them clean, they soaked them in vats of urine, feces, and lime. The stench carried for miles, a sour, choking odor that clung to everything: skin, clothes, hair, even dreams. Every breath they took was toxic. Lime burned their skin raw. Ammonia blinded their eyes. They worked with bare hands, turning rotting hides into leather through sheer endurance. They weren't seen as artisans. They were pariahs, living in shacks far from town, downwind from civilization. The smell alone marked them as untouchable. Then came the butchers, the visible face of death in every marketplace. Their stalls overflowed with blood and bones. Animals were slaughtered on open tables, entrails spilling onto dirt floors. There was no drainage, no sanitation. Rivers of gore seeped into the cobblestones. The buzz of flies was constant, and the rats, fat, fearless, thrived in the feast. Butchers were essential, yet despised. Towns needed meat, but no one wanted to live near the smell. They too were pushed to the margins, their homes clustered near the same rivers where the tanners dumped waste. It was a world built on contradiction. The same society that scorned them couldn't exist without them. While modern workers complain of deadlines and office politics, tanners and butchers inhaled death for a living. Their exhaustion wasn't mental, it was physical, chemical, absolute. Every scar, every burn, every breath of that rancid air was the price of survival. And if handling flesh and filth was degrading, one group of workers went even further, dealing not with the living, but with the dead. The executioners and the grave diggers, the men whose hands defined the thin line between justice and despair.
No job in the Middle Ages carried more dread or more stigma than those tied to death itself. The executioner stood before crowds as both servant of the law and outcast of humanity. His task was simple in theory: end lives. Yet every swing of the sword, every pull of the rope carved him deeper into isolation. Executioners were necessary instruments of order. Towns relied on them to enforce justice, to turn fear into obedience. But no one dared shake their hands. No one wanted to share a meal with the man who killed for a living. Even priests hesitated to grant them absolution. Children were taught to avert their eyes. To touch an executioner was to invite bad luck, or worse, spiritual contamination. And yet, these men lived in a constant paradox. The same society that spat at them depended on their skill. A clean, swift beheading meant mercy. A botched one meant agony and chaos. The executioner carried the weight of the spectacle, killing not for vengeance,
but for performance. Then there were the grave diggers. During plague years, they became as vital as any king's guard. They dug from dawn to dusk, burying hundreds a day. No coffins, no prayers, only dirt over bodies still warm. The air reeked of decay and lime, a scent that clung to them like a curse. Disease stalked them, yet they couldn't stop. If they fell sick, they were buried in the same pits they dug. Their work was endless, their reward minimal, their humanity stripped away by routine. To live among the dead was to lose touch with the living. Many drowned their horror in ale, others in silence. Despair was part of the profession. They didn't seek fame, they sought numbness. Because when you spend every day staring at the dead, eventually you stop feeling alive yourself. And so, from the executioner's stage to the gravedigger's pit, death wasn't just a profession, it was a way of life. But the story of these workers and all those who lived in filth and shadow ends with one final truth. Without them, medieval society would have crumbled.
Behind every gleaming castle and cathedral, behind the myths of knights, chivalry, and divine order, stood the people who did what no one else would. They shoveled waste, flayed hides, hunted rats, dug graves, and spilled blood, not for glory, but for survival. Their work was the foundation of medieval life. Even as society refused to look them in the eye. They were the invisible gears of civilization, turning quietly beneath the glamour of nobility. The rat catcher fought unseen enemies. The Gong farmer cleaned the filth that would have drowned the towns. The tanner and butcher transformed death into utility. The executioner and gravedigger kept order in a world constantly flirting with chaos. Yet for all their importance, they lived as ghosts among the living, banned from markets, shunned from churches, avoided in the streets. People depended on them but despised them. And that is the cruel irony of the medieval world. The more vital your work, the more disgusting it was considered. It's a fear that still lingers today, that our worth is measured not by the necessity of our labor, but by how comfortable it looks. Medieval workers knew the truth. Civilization survives only because someone is willing to get their hands dirty. So the next time you picture a shining knight or a royal feast, remember the hands that kept that world alive, covered in blood, filth, and sweat. In the Middle Ages, dignity was a luxury. Survival was the only career. And for those forgotten workers, the stench of their labor wasn't just the smell of filth, it was the smell of life itself.